Hello class, my name is Miss Jones, and today we will be discussing affirmative action and the importance of diversity in application processes and the fight to keep that alive within collegiate spaces. So before we begin, let's discuss the definition of affirmative action. What even is this? So, it is the active procedure to limit the occurrence of discrimination within an application process. That could be a result of institutionalized unfairness as a result of race, creed, color, or naturalized origin. So as we begin our discussion today, we're going to watch a video that sheds light on different aspects of the subject and also provides a respectful example of how to discuss affirmative action between one another in this class.
Affirmative action is so difficult because it calls into question two different visions of equality, and the Constitution doesn't provide us a clear answer.
Say you have a job to fill, or someone has a job to fill. Is it appropriate for them to take into account the skin color of the applicants?
It's a complicated question. I think that people should hire the best person qualified.
What is the right balance between rectifying the sins of the past and focusing more specifically on individuals in the present?
Affirmative action provides opportunities to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford those opportunities.
It shouldn't matter what sex you are, what color your skin, it shouldn't matter anything. Can you do the job?
Because, a purist would say we shouldn't have any kind of race discrimination, and a non-purist would say, yeah, except after 200 years of slavery and then 100 years of Jim Crow, we have a national stain on our honor.
Would it offend me if someone takes that into account? No.
People don't know how to prevent their personal biases from coloring their decisions.
It's not like affirmative action is anything new, and it's only been for African Americans. Rich white guys have been affirmatively acted upon for years.
Some groups have a harder time, even when they're qualified.
Will affirmative action be here for the ages? Probably not.
When Justice Sandra Day O'Connor cast the deciding vote upholding a state university's affirmative action program, she wrote, "We expect that 25 years from now, the use of racial preferences will no longer be necessary." That was in 2003. In not very many more years, we'll know whether she was correct.
Awesome, so let's get into the early history of affirmative action. Affirmative action first appeared in John F. Kennedy's Executive Order 10925 in 1961. It enforced all employers who contract with the government to show their affirmative action measures and metrics. This laid the groundwork for later federal policies aimed at reducing workplace discrimination. This executive order mandated for government contractors to take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and that employees are treated during employment, without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. This led to the government contracts having to keep track of affirmative action programs through compliance reports, such information as to the practices, policies, programs, employment policies, and employment statistics of the contractor or each subcontractor. The idea of affirmative action is that due to historical oppression of minority groups within America, many potential students within these identities are provided with less opportunity to succeed in higher education. Here are some previous cases that discuss discrimination within school systems and application processes, leading up to the 2023 Students for Fair Admissions, Inc. versus President and Fellow of Harvard College versus the University of North Carolina Supreme Court ruling. So after the Civil War, institutions continued to engage in racial discrimination through legal segregation. In 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education stated that these practices were held to be unequal and violated the Equal Protection Clause. Regents of University of California versus Bake in 1978 allowed for universities to use race in admissions as a plus in certain applicants. And in 2003, Grutter versus Bollinger decided that there were educational benefits to a diverse student body. However, schools are not allowed the use of racial quotas and race percentages in the admissions process. It also highlighted the importance of not using stereotypes and race as a negative to create a disadvantage for certain racial groups in decision-making. This came after Grutter argued that affirmative action would have little long-term effect on the expansion of diversity in schools. This was called the sunset provision. Here's a discussion question for you guys to consider. Discuss with those at your table. Do you believe that precedents like affirmative action will lead to the growth of diversity over time? Or do you agree with the sentiments of the sunset provision, which is little long-term effect on the expansion of diversity in schools? Now, let's discuss the actual court ruling. In 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against the use of race-conscious affirmative action in the college application process, led by the Students for Fair Admissions. Often mistaken as an Asian American Civil Rights Union, they filed a federal lawsuit toward Harvard and UNC. The nonprofit organization stated that the use of race factors in the admissions process violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. The SFFA argued that the affirmative action decision in Grutter versus Bollinger, which we just discussed, should be overruled. In response, Harvard and UNC stated that the use of race consciousness in the admissions process followed the Supreme Court precedent. The court case concluded 6-3 that the university's race-based decision-making used stereotypes that people of certain race think similarly and treat the race of certain applicants as a negative. So who is the SFFA? So the Student for Fair Admissions is a nonprofit organization led by Ed Bloom. Ed Bloom is a white American man who has a long history of fighting affirmative action programs. In the media and trial, SFFA used the Asian American community as a way to state their case. This is quite different to previous approaches to attack affirmative action, as before it was usually argued that race-conscious methods discriminated against white applicants. But for this court case, the Asian American community was brought to the forefront as the main group facing discrimination in collegiate application processes. Even the organization's website depicts an image of an Asian man peering down at his phone. The SFFA's quantitative statistics showed that Asian applicants were treated worse than white applicants of the same background, but these statistics excluded the preference of athletes, legacies, dean lists, / children of donors, and children of faculty and staff, which, according to the by Coach Daly, these select groups of students make up 43% of white students. The use of Asian Americans within the debate against the use of affirmative action begins an even bigger conversation on something called intersectionality. Are all minorities discriminated against equally, and is affirmative action meant to help all minorities? In 1989, Kimberly Crenshaw, a black feminist, created the term intersectionality. The word is used to describe the way the race, gender, class, etc. overlap within society. Intersectionality was coined as a metaphor to describe the experience of discrimination as an intersection, where a person is located based on their identity and discrimination comes at them from all different directions. In a publication on the California Law Review, it was stated by Jerry Kong that the switch was that SFFA's litigations ended up doing something quite different, namely, ending affirmative action for underrepresented minorities. Superficially, these may appear to be the same thing, but that assumes that discrimination against Asian Americans is equivalent to affirmative action for underrepresented minorities. As a result of the Supreme Court's conclusion, Asian Americans were not found to have had a boost in enrollment since the decision. This is especially the case when compared to white enrollment. In 1998, Thomas Kane used a parking spot metaphor to describe this scenario. When you're looking for parking in a busy lot, you will inevitably drive by an unused accessible parking spot, then grumble to yourself, if only we got rid of preferences for disabled people, I'd be able to park right now. But if that slot were to have been converted to a regular parking space, it would have been filled up almost immediately by some other car, and you'd still be looking for parking. In response to the court ruling, Chair of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, Charlotte Barrows, stated that the decision is a departure of decades of precedent and will undoubtedly hamper the effort of some colleges and universities to ensure diverse student bodies. Justice Sotomayor stated that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment enshrines a guarantee of racial equality, and the court's opinion is not grounded in law or fact and contravenes the vision of equality embodied in the 14th Amendment. As a result of the removal of affirmative action in colleges, the largest annual drop in the average number of Black and Hispanic students occurred across 59 colleges since 2010. The average percentage of Asian American students has not changed. However, the enrollment of white students has increased by 1%. Although we do see change, because of the 2% increase of students choosing to not disclose their race in 2024, the full data of the effect of affirmative action cannot be determined. So what now? How can we still continue to promote diversity in schools and application processes without utilizing race-conscious methods? Colleges can use data and socioeconomic status and geographic location to bring more equality to their approach to admissions. This data is often associated with race, as white families on average have a median wealth that is 10 times that of Black families. The choice of the Supreme Court will also affect the financial aid provided for young minority youths at predominantly white institutions. This will result in more Black students going to historically Black colleges. The following video is a news report that can help shed extra light on the predicted ways that colleges can continue to diversify their application processes without using race-conscious methods.
Contributor Jesse Weber, he is also an anchor on the Law and Crime Network. President Biden said this decision. Contributor Jesse Weber, he is also an anchor on the Law and Crime Network. President Biden said this decision was a severe disappointment and, quote, we cannot let this decision be the last word. So what happens next?
It's going to be very interesting. If universities want to create diversity, they're going to have to be very creative. So there's a couple of ways that they could do it. Obviously, they can't now enroll students based on race, but if they look at a student, let's say a Hispanic student, and the Hispanic student writes an essay about being discriminated against because of his or her race, they can accept that as a reason to accept that student. Now, they're not saying on their face they're accepting the student based on race, but based on that factor in their essay. Another issue, I've seen this actually come up, is that schools may actually look at schools in that jurisdiction, high schools in that jurisdiction, and say, we will pick the top student in that school, whether it's a bad school, no matter what neighborhood it is, as a way to be inclusive. You talked about socioeconomic backgrounds as well. They're going to have to be very creative if they want to maintain a diverse student body, because right now, this decision, we can't really express it enough, how monumental this is. In my lifetime, I've never seen anything like it, but we're also living in a day and age when stare decisis
Here are my references for this presentation. And here are more of my references. Thank you so much for your time, class. I hope you learned about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and have given some food for thought on the way collegiate application processes will work once it's your turn to apply.